First, we discussed the Keynesian cross model. Then, we talked about the ISLM model elaborately as the most popular model. Now, we would close the Keynesian model. And if you recall, what I told you right in the beginning, that a macro model has two parts, a complete macro model. One is the demand side of the model. One describes the supply side of the model. Now, all throughout the Keynesian cross model, ISLM model, these are all talking about the demand side of the model. I did not speak at all about the Keynesian supply side. In the classical model, I had the complete model, both the demand and the supply side. Now, on the demand side, then we talk about markets. So on the demand side, we have two markets which we study in macro models. One is the goods market, the other one is the money market. Now, in the Keynesian model, since we were talking about the demand side, we did talk about the goods market as well as the money market. That model is the ISLM model, where both the markets are there. Now, if ISLM represents the demand side of the Keynesian model, where is the demand curve? A normal question will come, sir, where is the demand curve? Because they describe the demand side of the economy. The demand side of the economy should have a demand curve. Similarly, when we talk about the supply side, having spoken about given the descriptions of the supply side, there should be a supply curve. In the classical model, there was a demand curve. You remember? There was a supply curve. Now, in the Keynesian model, where we spoke about the ISLM model, we talked about the cross model also, but where's the demand function? Now, since we have both the markets of the demand side, that is the goods market and the money market now in our notes, I should be in a position to tell you what the Keynesian demand function is like. So that's the thing that I would do first. Now, this discussion now, from today onwards, will be under a new topic, and the new topic is topic number 7. It's called the variable price Keynesian model. This is a medium-term model. This is a complete Keynesian model, medium-term model. Earlier, ISLM and Keynesian cross model, these two models were a short-run model where prices were fixed. If you open your notes, you will see prices were fixed. The supply curve was horizontal. Now we go into a medium-term model where prices can be a variable. That means, in simple words, there will be an upward sloping supply curve. There will be a downward sloping demand curve. Normally what happens in a market, that would also happen in an economy. So that if supply or demand changes, it's just not output which is going to respond, but prices are going to change also. Now, when we talk about prices changing, we go into a medium-term model. And this variable price Keynesian model, variable price, you can see the title, is a medium-term model which will have both the demand side as well as the supply side. This is what I'm calling, I will close the description, the discussion on Keynesian models with this topic. So topic 7 today. So let's begin the final Keynesian model, the topic, the closed economy model, is topic 7. Variable price Keynesian model. This is a medium-term model. Variable price Keynesian model. Now, it's a complete model, short run model. Short run, it will be a medium run. Closed economy model. That means no exports and imports. And it is a complete model. Complete model in the sense it will have the demand side and the supply side. Both the sides will be present, demand and supply. Now, the demand side is the ISLM model. Now, where is the demand function? Now, what I would do is, I will not obtain a demand function, but I will tell you the demand function exists because these are demand side equations, IS and LM, demand function exists, and I will derive the slope of the demand function. Now, before I do that, diagrammatically I can obtain the demand function. That will be the first intuition, how the ISLM model enables you to obtain the demand function. So I need two diagrams. You take a price level P naught. Suppose there's an LM function which depends upon some money supply and prices, say the P naught price. That's the equilibrium point. That's the amount of output produced. Now you get a coordinate for that level of output, Y naught. Right? Suppose some price at which the LM function has been obtained using that price. Look at the LM equation, M over P. Sub M is given M naught, P is P naught. Now, if we say prices are falling, if prices fall, what will happen in that equation? In the LM function. Suppose prices fall, or price falls. What will happen? It will become M naught over, say, P1 is equal to HY plus LR. Now, where P1 is less than P naught. Suppose prices fall. P1 is less than P naught. What will happen? The left-hand side value will increase, so the right-hand side value will increase, which means this line will shift to the right. Okay? It requires a higher level of Y. If left-hand side increases, right-hand side can increase either with a higher level of Y or with a higher level of L. Higher level of L requires lower R. All this indicates that the line will shift to the right. So the LM function will shift to the right, and it will become LM1, which has the same money supply and price is P1. Now you can see, suppose the price has fallen P1. So this output level this is Y1. So at a lower price, higher output level. Now you have two coordinates. All you have to do is just get a locus of such points and you can see what is coming out. The Keynesian aggregate demand function. As prices fall, more output will be produced in the economy or demanded. This is the demand function. More output will be demanded now. So you get the demand function coming from the ISLM model. Now if you are interested algebraically to know is, best thing would be to get the slope of the demand function. So algebraically, what you get is, you write the IS equations, IS and LM equation. called a money supply, but I make P now a variable. I'm going to variable price model. P will change now in the model, is a variable. I'm coming out of the ISLM model. I'm using the equations but dropping the assumption of fixed price, because price can now change. Now all you have to do, obtain the dp dy here. How much will be dp dy? You will see it's a negative term. So you differentiate the first equation, put this equal to 0. Differentiate the second equation, put m naught is equal to 0, dm naught 0, dA naught 0. Then you have these algebra that you can do. The first equation will give you dy is equal to c into 1 minus t dy plus ir dr. The second equation, m is 0, dm is 0, so it will be m naught over p square dp is equal to h dy plus lr dr. Now from this equation you can get dr. So dr is equal to minus m naught over p square dp minus h dy divided by lr. Put this dr in this equation. So what you have is dy is equal to c into 1 minus t dy minus, if you take the minus out, minus ir over lr into bracket m naught p square dp plus h dy. So you can take these terms, you can gather these terms together, y terms. So you have 1 minus c into 1 minus t plus ir h over lr. This is dy is equal to minus ir over lr m naught over p square dp. So dp dy, how much is dp dy? dp dy is equal to 1 minus c into 1 minus t, that multiplier denominator, IRH over LR divided by minus IR divided by LR m naught over p square. So this is your dp dy. You can see this is a negative term. This will be less than 0. So that's the slope. This is the slope of the demand function, of the Keynesian aggregate demand function. So this is the slope of the Keynesian aggregate demand function. Now you can clearly see one thing, a few things. Those efficiency stuff that I talked about, how fiscal policy becomes effective, more effective, how fiscal policy can become less effective, how monetary policy can become more effective, how monetary policy can become less effective, the things that I talked about, you can clearly see one thing, that those parameter restrictions, IR, LR, you remember those things I was talking about, restrictions IR, LR, will affect the aggregate demand function slope. It's very clear. For instance, one thing I mentioned, that LR liquidity trap, LR becomes infinite, minus infinite. Now, if you multiply numerator and denominator by LR, what do you have here by LR? You have numerator LR multiplied, and denominator it cancels out. So LR into that, LR goes to minus, dp dy slope becomes infinite also. So it becomes a vertical line. Do you see that? The aggregate demand function, if LR goes to minus infinity, the liquidity trap, when monetary policy becomes completely ineffective, only the IS curve determines output. LM curve is horizontal. Open your notes, last notes, you will see that there. LM is horizontal, IS curve determines output. Look what happens to the demand function. It gets a perfectly inelastic demand function. Do you see that? dp dy. Similarly, IR 0, no crowding out. I was talking about effectiveness of fiscal policy, no crowding out. If IR becomes 0, then what happens? My goodness. Same result, isn't it? Hello? Are you at all with me? If IR is 0, what happens to the slope dp dy? Same result. You get the same result if IR becomes 0. So it's very interesting, effectiveness of fiscal policy and the slope of the demand function. Because the demand function is obtained from ISLM model. And the effectiveness, ineffectiveness of fiscal policy, monetary policy, all that I discussed in the ISLM framework. So naturally, that is going to affect the demand function, because the demand function is obtained from the ISLM equations. So the ISLM curve becomes very interesting. I mean, ISLM curves also, they change the slope, and the demand curve becomes very interesting. But the question is the macroeconomic demand function, even in the medium run, perfectly inelastic? These are empirical issues. These are issues which one has to collect data, watch the economy, and come to a conclusion. Since this is theory, macroeconomic theory, I'm just telling you about the possibilities. That there is a possibility that the demand curve might become perfectly inelastic under certain parameter restrictions. And under those parameter restrictions, the fiscal policy effectiveness is increasing and monetary policy effectiveness is falling. So, do you see the demand function has some complication, possibilities of some complications, or the significance is that the effectiveness of fiscal vis-a-vis monetary policy is also associated with particular shape of the demand curve. It's normally downward sloping, but it can become. Now, when will it become? What will happen in the extreme classical position if LR is 0? Classical macroeconomists would say there was no speculative demand for money. If LR becomes 0, what will happen? IRH, what happens to dp dy? IRH divided by minus IR, so IR and minus IR goes away. So H into P square over M naught, which is the quantity theory, the classical demand function. That was the classical demand function. Open classical macroeconomics, that topic. That's the classical demand function it becomes. So these things you practice, you check, all right? It's clear, very clear from that equation there, that as LR becomes the classical LR, which is what classical macroeconomics say, there is no LR. So LR is 0. You clearly have the quantity theory of money result. If LR is 0, you multiply first by LR, then LR cancels out here. You have LR into this term is 0, then IR cancels out. You get a minus H over M naught into P square, HP square over M naught. It's a classical demand function, right? So the Keynesian demand function is very general in some sense, because if you put the parameter restrictions according to the classical model, you do get the classical model coming out from this. Do you see that? All right? Okay. Now before I go over to the supply side, I ask you a very simple question, which usually textbooks don't do. The fact that this slope or this demand function embodies the classical demand function, in the sense that if you put some restrictions, you get a variant of this demand becoming the classical demand. Otherwise, it's a Keynesian demand function. Also tells you that the ISLM model should also be general enough to embody the classical model. It should say that. The ISLM model should be general enough to contain the classical model. And so let me ask you this question, just like a tutorial. It is a good thing for you to think. What was the classical demand and money market and goods market? ISLM goods market and money market. Na? So in the classical model, what did we have? The goods market was savings, function of rate of interest, is equal to investment, function of rate of interest. Goods market clearing condition. All right? The money market was M naught over P is equal to H Y. Okay? So if this is the goods market and this is the money market, so this should give me an IS function, this should give me an LM function. So if you draw this classical IS function, what will it be? There is no Y value. There is no Y value. This equation solves for a single R. So this line should be horizontal for that value of R. This is the classical IS function. No Y value there. Okay? When you come to the money market equation, there is no R value. Y is equal to M naught over some value of P into H. No R value. Right? So how will it be? And this value here is M naught over some value of P into H. If P changes, this line shifts. But at equilibrium, P cannot change. So P would also become one value from this equation because Y was given in the classical model. So it will be a unique value of P. All right? So you can call that P naught maybe. But don't call it P naught, that's an equilibrium value of P. So this is the structure of the ISLM in the classical model, but classical macroeconomics never had ISLM. This is a paper that was written after Keynes's general theory was published. A paper was written and then you have the ISLM model. So what I'm trying to say, the ISLM function that you dealt with there is because of Keynes's contribution. But one thing you can see that function is a very general function, ISLM model, very general model. Under parameter restrictions, you can go back to the classical results from there. You can get the classical demand function there. I just showed you. You put the LR is equal to 0, you get the classical demand function. It's a very general function, but you can get the classical results from there. Keynes never said LR is equal to 0. Classical macroeconomists or their descendants like monetarists would say that. For instance, there used to be a famous monetary economist, a monetarist, Milton Friedman. If you read Friedman's articles, he is typically arguing for an LM curve which is vertical all the time. What does it mean? LM curve vertical, LR is 0. Then LM curve vertical. Because the slope of LM is minus H over LR. So LM curve vertical means LR is 0. Then minus H over LR is infinite, which is all right. And 0 slope would be horizontal line. Perfectly inelastic, that is called, and perfectly elastic, the 0 slope thing. These are the two words used in economics. A vertical line is perfectly inelastic line, it is said, and a horizontal line with zero slope, but it is called perfectly elastic. These are the words used. Zero slope is perfectly elastic. Vertical line, which is infinite slope, is perfectly inelastic because any change in price doesn't change the x-axis value. And the horizontal line, any small change in price can change a huge amount of change, either infinite amount or a very small amount, zero amount of x-axis value, the variable. All right? Okay? Good. Now, so this is the demand side of the story. It's a very general story. It's a very powerful model. Next, what we have is the Keynesian supply side. Now that's a complex story again, because he wanted to make it very realistic, or he did make many contributions. So the Keynesian supply side is again quite complicated. So now what I begin today is to start talking about the Keynesian supply side, and then I will conclude that after the break. Okay, Keynesian supply function. Now, one thing which is common with between a classical model and a Keynesian supply side equations, supply model, is that both of them had a production function which is very well behaved. That's a normal assumption. So they have a very well behaved production function. Well behaved in the sense, well, the production function is written as YF. N, I think the variable I used for labor, N, okay, labor and then fixed amount of capital. And well behavior basically means the partial derivatives, Fn is positive and Fnn is negative. This is normally what they have in a macro model. In fact, any macro model, these short-run macro models or long-run macro models or growth models, usually they have this assumption. It's called a well-behaved production function, where the partial derivatives are defined and they have proper signs. What it does diagrammatically, if you recall the diagram of the production function, diagrammatically the production function looked like this. You had probably, I think I had N here, I had Y here. And Fn greater than 0, Fnn less than 0 means the slope is positive, it's an upward sloping line but falling. Slope is falling, Fnn less than 0. So that is the production function, y is equal to f n k naught. So this tangent essentially measures Fn. So Fn is falling, the tangent is becoming flatter. So Fn is falling, first derivative is falling, value of first derivative. So the second derivative is negative. This is, which is, in words, it's known as this Fn, in words, they are called marginal product of labor. Marginal product of labor, which is positive. Marginal product of labor is positive, which is Fn greater than 0 and but diminishing. Which is Fnn less than 0. Marginal product of labor is positive but diminishing. All right? That's what it means, the well-behaved production function. This line I'm talking about. So this part is the same as the classical model. If you open your notes, you will see I have the production function exactly like this. But when it comes to the labor market, the Keynesian labor market is very different. The Keynesian labor market is very different. It has a bundle of assumptions here, the labor market. Now let's see how the labor market looks like, the Keynesian labor market. In the labor market, there should be a labor demand function, there should be a labor supply function. The labor demand function, amazingly, is the same thing because it comes from the profit maximizing hypothesis of the firm. If you remember, I did a profit function, a firm which sells a good at a price, hires labor and other factors to produce it. The first order profit maximizing condition was marginal product of labor is equal to W over P, the wage rate it pays to labor, divided by the price of the product. So the labor demand function is exactly the same. So what you have is Fn at the macro level also, you have Fn is equal to W over P, where W over P I call this is real wage. And W over P is real wage, and W is, sometimes they use the word money, and sometimes they use the word nominal wage. Textbooks use these words, money wage and nominal wage. Labor demand function. However, here comes the story. The labor supply function is very funny. The labor supply function. The labor supply function is equal to only Gn is equal to W, no P whatsoever. There is no P. Now this is a post-Keynesian interpretation of Keynes. Often these models, the way they exist today, are being taught in class or written in textbooks, described in textbooks, can very well be a post-Keynesian description of what Keynes wanted to say. Sometimes these books say things in a very difficult manner. So it develops into various interpretations. Now this is broadly speaking the consensus on what the Keynesian labor supply function would look like. It will be Gn is equal to W, no P. That means labor supplies works for somebody by not looking at real wage, but by looking at only nominal wage. It's a very important difference. So when I get a job, some company asks me to work, I look at how much money they would give me, not how much I can buy with the money they would give me, which is real wage. That means I don't look at like the classical macroeconomists, I don't look at the goods, amount of goods that I can buy with the money. So in that case, I have to take into consideration the price. In the Keynesian model, the labor supply function clearly says, the way it has been interpreted, is that the labor looks at the money they give you, all right? And he agrees to work for some number of hours, a day, a week, a month, or whatever. Which means it ignores the purchasing power of money, it seems to be. Price is not there. This has come to be known, this kind of a supply function where the price is ignored and only the money wage or money income, 1,000 rupees or 10,000 rupees or 1 lakh rupees is important to me, not 1 lakh rupees divided by prices. It has come to be known as the worker has, this has a very interesting expression. The expression is that the worker has, this one is said the worker has money illusion. Workers have, is called money illusion. It's called the workers have money illusion. Illusion means if I'm paid this year 10,000 rupees and last year I was paid 9,000 rupees, I'm very happy I get 1,000 rupees more. But a smart fellow would see from last year to this year how much prices have gone up. Is that 1,000 rupees extra that the boss is giving me good enough to buy all the goods that I could have bought last year, plus something more? Because it looks like I have an increased income. But when I take the prices into consideration, I realize, my goodness, with 1,000 rupees extra this year, forget about me having more money in my pocket in the sense I can buy more goods. I am not in a position to buy even the amount I bought last year because prices have gone up so much. So a smart fellow would look at real wage and compare the increase in the money in real value terms. And what he realizes, 10,000 rupees is not good enough for me to buy all that I did with 9,000 rupees last year. But a person having money illusion is like me, you know, kind of a silly person, doesn't understand the value of money. हमको तो 1,000 रुपया ज़्यादा मिला इस साल, बहुत अच्छा बात है, और खर्चा कर डाले, उसके बाद देखा है ही नहीं कुछ पॉकेट में, क्योंकि सोच रहे थे मेरे इनकम ज़्यादा मिला. बाजार में जो भाव है is so high that the fellow even didn't get what he got last year. So savings can get affected. Person who has money illusion gets overexcited emotionally, thinking that I have now more money because my boss gave me more income, and I start spending without realizing what the prices have become. Finally, when I did spend all that I wanted to do, I realized I have less savings. It can happen because prices have gone up. This is what happens in real life. So in recession or in times of inflation, particularly, savings go down in an economy. ठीक है? Do you see that? Money illusion is a very important assumption. Now I tell you the last assumption that the labor market requires, and probably now the entire picture will be clear what Keynes had in mind. The last assumption is that why wage and money illusion is there, because this W that exists in the Keynesian labor market, which we think give rise to money illusion in some sense, is actually forced upon the workers, because in a modern system, wage doesn't change every day, every hour, depending upon supply and demand, which we say in perfect competition happens, in free market it happens, that as soon as there is excess demand, prices would go up. As soon as there is excess supply, prices would go down. Prices don't change that quickly, at least in the labor market. At least in the labor market, the price is the wage rate. Wage rate doesn't change so quickly. आज ज़्यादा आदमी काम में आ गया, वेज गिर गया, एक्सेस सप्लाई हो गया. आज बहुत कम आदमी आए तो काम में, भाव बढ़ाओ तब आएगा, वेज बढ़ गया. ऐसा होता नहीं है. Wages don't move up and down the way free market models say. It's very difficult to make wages move up and down so frequently to clear the labor market. So what Keynes was saying, which is very realistic, or at least what people thought, post-Keynesians thought what Keynes was saying, is that this money illusion business emerges more so because W is a contractual wage, which means every year, this is how it happens, or every 2 years, in case of IIT, every 5 or 6 years, the government or the employer and the workers sit together across a table, negotiate a wage. Say the trade unions and the employer, the firm bosses, sit together, negotiate a wage. Once it has been negotiated, at the time of negotiation, there is no money illusion, of course. Workers scream, "Itna bhav bade hai, itna bhi बढ़ sakte hai." So we need this wage. And the company managers and owners usually say, "उतना तो दे नहीं पाऊंगा, मेरा cost बहुत ज़्यादा हो जाएगा." ये tussle होते रहे, and they finally reach a wage, which is an agreed wage, which is a contractual wage. Once the contractual wage is set, in this kind of a model, the contractual wage remains there over that medium-term period, whatever that length of the time, 1 year, 1.5 year, 2 years. In case of IIT, it's usually 5-6 years. Then again, government goes for what is known as pay revision. So contractual wages are a common phenomenon in this world. It's not a free market wage that clears every day, every year even, every month even. It's usually a contractual wage that is agreed upon between the workers, which are the trade unions, etc., who represent them, and the bosses of the company, owners of the company. So what you have in the Keynesian model, a very important thing, is that this labor supply, labor demand, and then another assumption comes, fixed money wage. So essentially you have the labor demand function, the labor supply function, and the fixed money wage, 3 labor market related items. 3 labor market related items. 3 labor market related items you have: labor demand function, labor supply function, and a fixed money wage because of the contractual nature of wage over the medium term, which means you have W is equal to, say, what you have is W becomes equal to W naught. Now once W is equal to W naught, any worker who works for the company doesn't pay any heed to prices, because no, this is a contractually agreed upon wage. Now if I have to work for the company, I will accept that wage, right? So one outsider can look at it and look at this kind of an equation, labor supply function, only money wage entering, because this is a contractual wage that they will have agreed to get. It looks like workers have money illusion. Workers in real life don't have money illusion, but they have no choice. They have to accept the agreed wage. All right? Do you see what I'm saying here? Why money illusion becomes an interpretation in some sense? Because workers, when they go and work for somebody, look at the packet. They don't have any power to influence it. It has already been decided that for 2011-12, this will be the wage that the company would pay to a particular type of labor. So if you are a particular type of labor, want to work for the company, you have to accept the wage. So it looks like he doesn't require to know the prices. Is the wage good, bad to him compared to what he gets now? Well, he will think about it, but for us, for the general public, it's not important. For the company, it's not important. If you have to work for us, this is what you will get. Because this has been agreed, it has been legalized. It has been agreed between the company and the workers. So this is quite realistic in some sense, because this actually happens. Tomorrow you get a job, you don't have much power to bargain the wage. And you would, if you want to go deep into it, how that wage is being offered to you, you would realize there has been an agreement that this kind of a wage will be paid. Largely the companies decide, and what also the unions have come into the picture, where they have been taken into consideration, so that company owners also fear the unions. If they call a strike, there will be huge loss. But essentially we have wages as contractual wages. Okay? All right, so the Keynesian labor market becomes very realistic but becoming very complicated. So now I have to show you with these assumptions what kind of a supply function you will get. So what I said is the Keynesian labor market is quite complicated. There are some similarities with a conventional labor market description, but not all that. Well, if you go to the major story here, the supply function, the supply function has two components. One is the labor market descriptions, one the production function. The production function is the same because this is the neoclassical production function, kind of a production function you have seen in the classical model. There is no difference here, this is all right. But when it comes to labor market, you realize that there are some differences. Labor demand function was exactly this in the classical model, but the labor supply function wasn't this. It was W over P. So what's the significance of having only W as opposed to W over P? I told you about the story of money illusion, the interpretation one gives. But when you look at the wage rigidity assumption, it's called wage rigidity. Rigid means fixed, which doesn't change. Opposite of rigid would be, in school they will teach you, right, the opposite word, you know, antonym, synonym? Flexible, exactly. In school we used to learn antonym, synonym. So flexible. So rigid or flexible, that's what I mean. Rigid in the sense it's fixed. It's predetermined. I go to a company, I want to work. They say, okay, your qualification suits us. You can work here from tomorrow, but this is the wage. You cannot bargain. The bargaining has already taken place and is fixed for you. All right? Okay. So this is the fixed money wage, which is called as rigid money wage. And because of this assumption, essentially the labor supply function, I think, has a situation where workers are money illusion. Because workers cannot pay attention to price changes and can tell the company, the wage को भी बढ़ाओ कमाओ. और कौन वर्कर कमाने के लिए बताएंगे आप बताओ तो? हमको एक बार 1000 rupees मिला, कल प्राइस गिरे, ठीक है? Do you think I as a worker would agree? ठीक है, मेरा money को भी कम कर दो. So this flexibility assumption in both ways, that the wages can go up and down, which is a market, the capitalist market explains that there is a demand and supply. So excess supply may price will fall, excess demand may price will go up and clear the market, may not be true for all markets. In goods market it can happen. I have seen prices going up and prices going down. I have seen that. Apple prices going up, apple prices going down. Vegetable prices going up, vegetable prices going down. Even consumer durables I have seen going up, going down. I have seen that. Consumer durables. But you tell me, in labor market prices going up, going down, बहुत मुश्किल है. Workers don't accept that. If I tell my car price गिर गया, if I tell my Mali, tomorrow, next month I will pay lesser amount of salary, he will not agree. I don't think so. So there is a problem. So anyway, the rigid wage assumption makes life simpler. So therefore, with these assumptions, let's now go into the labor supply function, the Keynesian aggregate supply function. So the Keynesian supply function, you can see one thing. There are some equations which will become redundant. So now rewrite the equations. The functions or whatever. You have a production function. You have a labor demand function. You have a labor supply function. And you have a rigid wage assumption. All right? So now, if I draw the labor market, what will happen? I will have to draw it differently because one function doesn't have P, one function has P. Labor demand function, there is a P. Labor supply function doesn't have a P. So I have to draw it differently. So what I would draw is I put now wage on the y-axis and labor on the x-axis. And the labor demand function, I will not draw Fn, I would draw that for a specific price Pfn. I take a price sum P and then draw it. Labor demand function. And the labor supply function with the usual assumptions, I draw that as Gn. Labor supply function. If you remember, G subscript n, which means the first partial derivative is positive. I told you that story labor leisure model, how labor supply increases as wages increase. So that is still used here. Now the question is, W is equal to W naught where? There are two possibilities. W is equal to W naught can create a disequilibrium. Accidentally it may hit the point, but then as soon as any of the lines shift, you have a disequilibrium. But suppose it doesn't hit the point, what you have is W is equal to W naught can either be above the equilibrium point or it can be below the equilibrium point. The question is, which one did Keynes say? Where is W is equal to W naught? Now Keynes wrote his book, or was writing his book. The book was published after, although that particular period, but he was writing that book in a period of Great Depression. There's a lot of unemployment in the entire economy in the Western world. Germany, France, England, Canada, United States. The entire Western world was in the grip of depression, which is known as the Great Depression, which started roughly in 1929 and roughly ended in 1933, 4 years it lasted. The book was published in 1936. So he wrote it around that time of the depression, unemployment. So Keynes also had one more thing in mind, which we use in our description of Keynesian model. It's very important. There exists surplus labor in the economy. There exists surplus labor in the economy. How can surplus labor exist in the economy? You can clearly see that if I make W naught negotiated wage here, then there will be a surplus labor because the supply of labor is here at that wage. Call that NS naught, supply of labor. NS naught, okay? And for a given price, call that P naught. For a given price P naught, the labor demand function is P naught Fn, which says that the demand for labor is here, ND naught. If you agree with Keynesian assumption that the economy is at under full employment level where there is surplus labor, people are waiting for jobs, that kind of a situation, then technically speaking, the wage rate that they negotiated must be above the equilibrium point, because only above the equilibrium point you can have surplus labor, means unutilized labor. Okay? You can have unutilized labor. People are unemployed. Now, in this kind of an economy where you have disequilibrium, people can ask you, sir, there are two values of N coming out here. One is NS naught, according to the wage and the functions, which is supply of labor, and one is ND naught. This is the demand for labor. So, what is the employment level, sir, in the economy? You can ask me. How many people therefore are employed? We say in economics, when you have disequilibrium in the economy, that the demand is less or the supply is less, one of them is less and the one is more, then the short side of the market decides the value. The short side of the market is one which has a lesser number. Here, the demand for labor is less than supply of labor. So the short side of the market, which is demand for labor, decides how many people would be hired. So the how many people are hired is actually ND naught. So ND naught is essentially equal to N. You can call that N naught. N naught is nothing but employment. That talks about the number of people hired. And N naught is employment, the number of people hired. All right? So now I have complicated my life enough. You have a labor market where there is surplus labor, where money wages are fixed, where workers seems to have money illusion in the medium run. They cannot renegotiate wages. They're rigid. They're not flexible. And only thing that remains from the earlier supply function is that there is a neoclassical well-behaved production function with Fn greater than 0, Fnn less than 0, and a labor demand function, which is the one I have seen before. But many things have changed now. There are many more features of the labor market, the Keynesian labor market, than we have seen before. Clear? If I have to incorporate all this. Do you agree with this diagram or not? The short side of the market decides employment. I give you an exercise, mental exercise. If this wage had been fixed here, where demand is more than supply, what would have been employment? Supply. Because supply that is the only amount that is available. Companies may be asking for more people, maybe 1,000 people, but only 600 people available. So 600 will be employed. So the employment number is 600, not 1,000. What company wants? Company don't have that many supply in the market, that many workers. All right? So short side of the market would decide the value when you have a disequilibrium. At equilibrium, supply is always equal to demand. So there is no short side of the market. Both the sides are matched. That's why it's called equilibrium in some sense. Okay. Now, if you agree with this, now I come to the Keynesian supply function. Keynesian aggregate supply function. Okay. Keynesian aggregate supply function, I will do that first diagrammatically. And just wait, don't draw the diagram. It will be a little bit complicated. Let me draw this first. Then I would do algebraically. And the way I do algebraically, I just find the slope. And Okay, let's suppose I take a price, some P naught. Don't draw it now. At P naught Fn is the labor demand function now, because W I put here, not W over P. So with price change, this line will shift. At P naught, this is the amount that is hired, because there is a surplus labor which is not used. So this is N naught, amount of employment. This employment line, I take it and find out what is the amount of output produced. That's the amount of output produced. So that output level will go, and from y-axis I translate it through the 45-degree line onto the x-axis. So this is y naught, and therefore I have a coordinate at that price, how much output is produced, which is y naught. You can come to this axis, y naught. Now, as prices increase to, say, at a higher price, you take another higher price, take another color, say P1. As prices increase, the labor demand function will shift to P1 Fn. There will be higher amount of employment, which is N1, and you can again find out higher amount of employment which is y1, which is y1. Now you can see that you have two coordinates, and there will be this aggregate supply function for sloping coming out. As prices increase, more output is produced, more employment is generated. So this is Keynesian aggregate supply function. Very important diagram, because a number of points I want to make again after this. Output, supplied on the x-axis. It was on the y-axis. This one, I translated that through the 45-degree line on this line. So this is equal to that, so that I can have that on the x-axis. Because supply demand may output or good is amount is on the x-axis. The production function has it on the y-axis, so I require the 45-degree line here to translate the y-axis value onto the x-axis, so that it can come on the x-axis. All right, everybody got the diagram? Little bit left. Now, note one thing, few things here, very important. This Keynesian aggregate supply function, upward sloping, fine, but if price keeps on increasing in the medium term, this line keeps on shifting, at one point for a given wage it may intersect the GN line there, the labor supply. You see that? After that, if it increases further, shorter side of the market becomes the supply function, the demand is more. If it shifts more, then the demand is more than supply. So, and supply restricts output, so output is stuck somewhere. It cannot increase anymore. If prices increase further, demand may shift to the right, but people are not there to work. So the supply, shorter side of the market is supply of labor, which restricts employment and output to a particular level. So this Keynesian aggregate supply function, at that point, if you can draw that point, with what kind of a line? At that point here, when it keeps on shifting, at that point, will, at some price, when it is increasing, at some price, it will become absolutely vertical. At that level, some level, this will become, that output level is where labor supply is equal to labor demand according to the classical model. What is it? When labor supply equals labor demand? Exactly. This is some output level which is called full employment output level. This is the case where you have full employment in the medium run. Where labor supply is equal to labor demand. Labor supply is equal to labor demand. So the aggregate supply function becomes vertical. The aggregate supply function here becomes vertical. Just like the classical aggregate supply function, it will become vertical. You cannot change any more output beyond that. Okay? All right. However, this can happen at some very high price level. Some price level it can happen. All right. Next point to note is, the unemployment in this model, is equal to NS minus ND, unemployment in this model. So if you want to know the unemployment, say initially at price P naught, the unemployment was this amount. This is the unemployment. When price increased, more output is produced, the unemployment declined, and the unemployment became this amount from here to here. So it became this amount, unemployment. It shrank. The green unemployment was more, NS minus ND, then NS minus ND shrank as price increased. So that is unemployment. And unemployment, this one, as P increased, NS minus ND, this amount fell. That means unemployment fell. More people are hired, more output is produced. It's very clear. That's the unemployment measurement. And at that point, pink, there is no unemployment, zero unemployment, which is called full employment, because labor supply is equal to labor demand. In the medium run, remember, it's not a long run full employment, it's a medium run, you reach a full employment. Acha. This unemployment, which suddenly became visible in a macro model which wasn't there in the classical model, this unemployment acquired a name. This unemployment is called, this business is called involuntary unemployment. That means true unemployment. Unemployment matters to me if it is involuntary, isn't it? I mean, I'm not willingly sitting at home and not working. Then I'm not really unemployed. I'm willingly sitting at home, not looking for a job, not working. So this unemployment had another adjective added to it, is called the involuntary unemployment. Not voluntarily, involuntarily. Means against my wish, I'm unemployed. I want to work, but I don't find work. True unemployment. And the unemployment at full employment level, which I talked to you about in the first topic, I had some questions also, is the frictional unemployment. That is voluntary unemployment. All right? So involuntary unemployment, this can exist in Keynesian model like this, but in classical model, labor supply is equal to labor demand, so there is no unemployment. Labor supply is equal to labor demand, there is no unemployment. So in the classical model, if you can talk about unemployment, it can only be voluntary unemployment, which is not really true unemployment. Voluntary unemployment. At full employment, the unemployment exists. That exists in classical model, always in classical model. And also, if you can reach labor supply and labor demand, it can also exist in Keynesian model. So these words you may come across in textbooks, voluntary and involuntary unemployment. These words become, just a second, these words become very important. These two expressions exist. What we call unemployment, in macroeconomics, they have a more sophisticated expression. They call it involuntary unemployment. But there can be some unemployment which is voluntary, like frictional. I have job, but I don't want to. I'd rather wait out 2 months, get a better job. That is voluntary unemployment, which can exist at full employment, and that is a classical model feature. But can also exist in Keynesian model. In the short run, or medium run, it can happen. Some voluntary unemployment. But involuntary unemployment cannot exist in classical model, because in classical model, you have perfect flexibility of wages and prices. So labor market is always in equilibrium. Labor supply is equal to labor demand always, because you have flexibility. In a Keynesian model, you have wages fixed. That rigidity may give rise to disequilibrium in the labor market, which means you can have unemployment. That is labor supply more than labor demand. But labor supply more than labor demand, labor supply less than labor demand cannot happen in a classical model, because wages are fixed. Wages are flexible there. So they can clear the market any time. So labor supply is equal to labor demand always. Labor supply is equal to labor demand always. So if you talk about unemployment in a classical model, it can only be voluntary unemployment. There where people get very angry. So on earth, do you have only voluntary unemployment? Like what is happening in the Western world today? In US, in Germany, in France, Canada, Greece, Spain, Portugal, all the bahut hi kharab. You call that voluntary unemployment because classical macroeconomics only had a voluntary unemployment, scope for discussion. But in a Keynesian model, you have scope for discussing the true unemployment, what we call. When people want job, they are qualified, but they are not finding work. The involuntary unemployment. That NS minus ND non-zero, positive in sense. Non-zero khali nahi, positive. Now you ask me the question you want.
You said people are not looking for a job, they are not treated as unemployed. Isn't that true?
People are not looking for a job. They're not part of unemployed people. Absolutely right. Yes.
There is a question of voluntary unemployment.
Voluntary unemployment is, which I talked about in connection with full employment, level of unemployment. At full employment, there can still be some unemployment. Like in US, they said about 4 to 5% of the labor force, even when the economy has been declared at full employment level in the 60s and the 70s, they used to have.
But that's frictional.
That is frictional unemployment. That frictional unemployment is people are looking for a better job. So voluntary unemployment is people are looking for, no, okay, I understand what you're saying. Voluntary unemployment in some sense is not true unemployment. But voluntary unemployment in that sense can be interpreted as frictional unemployment if people are voluntarily not going to work when they have work, but looking for a better job. Even unemployment data is funny, it includes part-time workers as fully employed, which is not true. I have a part-time job. I'm always in the lookout for a better job. But I have no money at home, so I have accepted a part-time job. The labor census board, or the labor board, or the labor ministry in most countries count him as somebody who's employed. Mushkil ho gaya. Or my father has a business, I go there, I help him out, I will be counted out of unemployment. So there are problems. My father has a business, I go and help him out is natural. But the problem is, so voluntarily unemployed in the sense, I'm voluntarily sitting at home, but for a temporary period, I'm still looking for a job. I have disallowed this job, I returned it down because it doesn't pay me well, or I don't like the job profile, or whatever. Okay? But one who gives up looking for a job is not part of unemployment number in a country, who are called discouraged workers. Somebody was unemployed for a long time, was looking for a job. I knew people from Calcutta. Then they gave up looking for a job. I'm talking about very bad days in the 60s and 70s when I was growing up in Calcutta. I remember people, I know people personally, who gave up. Now the unemployment number in a country would say, oh, that fellow has given up. He may be a discouraged worker, but he will not be counted as one of the unemployeds. There are issues, separate issues. Very disturbing issue, very separate issues. A guy who has been looking for a job, got discouraged, is no longer counted as unemployed by the state. Very strange. बेचारा होना है, स्टेट को एक्स्ट्रा बेनिफिट देना है उनको. State just counts him out. Have you been following the supply function? So the aggregate Keynesian supply function can become vertical. Although it's normally upward sloping, but if price increase too much, it can become vertical. You saw that. Second, I want to ask you a question. Although in this kind of a model, technological changes are not incorporated, but suppose I do a comparative static exercise of incorporating a technological change. Suppose the technology to produce the production function improves, I say. There is a better technology that the country uses in an aggregate sense. That many companies have better technology now as they had earlier. What do you think will be the effects? This is the last issue we will discuss today, and we will have an off. Tomorrow is an off day. We will meet again on Wednesday. So these fellows will have a mid-sem, 3-4 fellows will have a mid-sem make-up tomorrow. You tell me, if you have technology overall improving in a country, in terms of this kind of diagram, what do you think is the first impact going to come? Let me see how you have understood economics and use common day discussions like this, TV topics, in terms of your macro framework. I'm just checking out. This is a good exam question actually. Suppose technologies have improved. Hawaii, labor demand function. Improvement. Very good, very good. Per capita efficiency. So what will happen for every labor hired, a better technology will give a higher output. So at that point, marginal product will increase. So the marginal product line for same price will shift to the right. So more employment, more output, more productivity. So what will happen to the supply function? At the same price, you will have a higher output. So the supply function will entirely shift to the right. Very good. Technological improvement basically means per capita efficiency has gone up. Every individual is more efficiently working now. There where it contributes to a company, there where it contributes to a country. So the production function will shift upwards. So the production function will become something like this. So any amount of labor will have a steeper tangent, which means marginal product has shifted to the right, is higher. So every price will have a higher output, because every employment will have a higher output, higher output, higher output, every price. So you can see the supply function is shifting to the right. Very good. I'm very happy. Although we don't incorporate technological improvements, they are in growth models, but we can study with the framework we have that what, in a competitive static sense, technological improvements do to a country. That's why people talk about two things these days, if you pay attention. A country grows, or US has grown so much and world's largest economy because of two reasons. One, technological improvements they had, no other country had. You take any major technology in the world, starting from computers, automobiles, anything, started there. Number two, their human capital is very good, education, etc. Where do you go for higher studies? Still you go for higher studies. Where do you go? Have you seen the destination? Take IIT Kanpur sample. Where do people go for higher studies? US. Bulk of them, 90% go still to US. Why? Because this is another thing, along with technological improvement. If the skill quality improves, same labor can produce more. Same effect, production function shift upwards. And benefit in terms of supply function. Supply function shifts to the right. Given a demand function, what will happen to the prices in the economy? Given the demand function, which I don't have, if supply shifts to the right, what happens to prices? Yeah. So you have wonderful combinations now coming. Economy growing in a dynamic sense, more output, more incremental technological improvements, better skilled quality people, and prices also falling. So what will you call an illness in the economy? Economy is not doing well. Prices going up, growth rate falling, stagflation, recession, illness. So to counter this illness, what is the best route to counter? Is a demand increase or a supply increase? Shift supply. And that's the quick solution the finance ministry in India tried when the recession set in. It has backfired so badly, it has postponed issues relating to development so far that overnight we don't have a solution now. Now you understand macroeconomics, how it helps you to understand some of the things. Demand management policies are always very inflationary. Because given a supply curve with demand shifts, output थोड़ा बढ़ेगा, company लोग stretch कर रहा है, भाव बढ़ रहा है, अब profit होगा, किंतु the real improvements don't take place. Prices also go up. So the solution comes from the supply side to a long-term solution, not short-term. And this is exactly where they're mismanaging the economy in India, UPA 2. I'm not trying to be political. It's true. You will find that out yourself. It has failed.